Sandrine? Hello, Sandrine. Have we met before, Sandrine?
I don't think so.
So how is it that you find yourself here today, Sandrine?
I was brought by my friend who wanted to share this experience with me.
And this is your friend?
No, my friend Andrew.
Ah. And what did he tell you to induce you to get in the car?
He said 1, 2, 3, let's go. That sounded right.
And here you are. Well, you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Did he give you any indication what you were in for?
A little bit.
Yes, what did he tell you?
He told me that I was going to be in a room with people and that we were going to sit together and that you were going to, be on the opposite of us, like you are, and that we just had to be present and follow the hour, and that you were going to ask me my name.
So you were prepared.
I was very prepared. I tried
and you
to
remembered,
remember.
yes, your name? Yes, very good.
Remember my name.
Excellent.
And,
so you've passed. This is the only
so far,
really requirement. No, it's the only requirement.
After that, I don't know what's going to happen.
Me either. So we're on equal footing. Would you consider yourself to be a spiritual seeker, Sandrine?
I think so.
And how did that happen for you?
I think it happened when I was a child, and that I connected with nature.
In what country were you a child?
In France.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. In which part of France?
I grew up in Bordeaux. Mm-hmm. And always being curious about. I don't know.
So you felt a connection with nature and.
Nature, some friends that opened my eyes to certain things also, and I don't,
Opened your eyes in what way?
In experiences that I never had, that I wanted to maybe seek, or feelings, connections that I could look for, and
connections between people or
between people, between me and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this teaching, we focus pretty much on you. On when we say we would like to be connected with this ineffable something, rather than focusing on what is this ineffable something that we want to be connected to, where we start is with what is it that wants to be connected with that? What are you? And so what is the nature of this thing that has an impulse or a desire or some movement to connect? The advantage as far as I'm concerned with this approach, is that there's a you there that you're quite familiar with.
Fully.
Yeah. So, and what unfortunately often happens with human beings in familiar surroundings is we don't see them. It's the very nature of familiarity. It tends to make what is there somewhat invisible, and what you notice is the unusual, the strange, the different, the curious. But that which is there all the time tends to, for the most part, fade into the background. Now, this me that is here all the time suffers the same fate. That because I am here and have been here for as long as I remember, the me that is here is just sort of assumed to be here. So what we want to do is take a deeper look at the nature of this me that's here. What is this? What's going on? How is it that I have these feelings? Clearly, they're different from what other people have and other people think. How is it that I am this way? And how does this me that perceives things the way that I perceive them, what does that have to do with the way things are? So all of these questions are proposed as things that maybe stimulate your interest. See if any of those kind of hook you into going, yeah, what is that? So over the course of the day, or the afternoon, or morning, we will probably, have a number of these things that are suggested as a way to look, a direction to look, not a way to look, but just a pointer to something. And if anything captures your interest, follow it. And if it doesn't, no big deal. There is no right way or wrong way to go about this. It is absolutely the gentlest and easiest kind of teaching that you probably run across. Just trying to take a look at what's here. So, if anything that I talk about is confusing and some of the terms that I use are of my own construction and things, please don't hesitate to ask if you like. And what is your name?
Anton.
Anton?
Yeah.
Have we met Anton?
No.
I see.
I watched your videos and read your books, maybe 3 books, and I always wanted to come, but I never had time, so just this time I came.
So in the videos and the books that you've read, has that answered all your questions, or are some of the questions still fresh for you?
I think I have like intellectual understanding of what you're saying. It's more that there's like this energetic component that kind of that present, and that kind of causes confusion sometimes, where there's like something that outside and something that inside, and sometimes the attention is get caught in what is like inside, on all the like energetic components, and then basically you kind of still continue your life, but then inside something is happening. It could be a conflict, could be like sometimes it just like dissolves, and sometimes it happens again. So that's what was happening like basically like the last couple of years. I've been doing Vipassana meditation, and also just sitting without any kind of technique for a while. I also had a couple of psychotic episodes. of those was like on a Vipassana course, and so like, and basically after each of those there was like some shift in how I perceive myself, and yeah, I guess I'm kind of in the situation where kind of I know that I don't know who I am, and I don't know, like I kind of don't know anything, right? I kind of know, but like I know the concepts, but I don't know like actually what's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what is real and what is not real as well. So this is kind of where I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fairly easy to get grounded on one real thing, and that is that I am. There is something here, and that's undeniable.
That's a lot of everything as well.
But there is something in your own consciousness. There is something, whether we call it the energy of your consciousness, which we'll say could be unreal. But that energy which produces the unreality is real. That's all we can come to, that there is something. And we can call that something nothing, because it has no properties and qualities. We can call it God, we can call it source, we can call it whatever we want. Consciousness, totality, doesn't matter. Better to call it nothing at all. But we point to that unmistakable aspect of yourself that it is undeniable.
That is always the same, or that is always changing?
Its manifestation is always changing, but it is always the same. It is that which is before anything. So this is what the teaching is pointing you to look at. It's what Vipassana is pointing you to look at. It is what any spiritual practice eventually is directing you to. That which cannot be denied, and that which cannot be known intellectually, but cannot be denied intellectually either. Because the moment you deny it intellectually, you affirm it. But there's something denying it. You see? So there is something.
In the moment when you conflict with that, you have a manifestation of something, right? Or is
No,
it?
you are the manifestation of that. Whatever conflict you may be having is that expressed as you having a conflict.
Is it outside or inside?
So the general pointer is to look inside, because your personal consciousness is identified as you. This is your personal consciousness. But what we're trying to point to is that which animates your personal consciousness.
it is still, but then something happens, right? So like, and that animates is always not there.
That which the energy which animates, is that what you're talking about, or the animation itself?
Um, the energy that is perceived, like a could be like body sensations or emotions, or it could be like kind of tension or like light or heaviness or something that's in the body, and also like a light or something. So everything kind of exists, and in that kind of it's kind of a mess of everything, and where like everything happens, but there is no center in that.
That's right. There is no center in it. There is only the perceiver of it. That which experiences that.
And it's not there in that mess. It's somewhere outside of that, or
Well, that's where it gets interesting. You say, what is that? How does it relate? What is this inside outside? Inside what? Outside what? These are the questions that the teaching points you to explore if they interest you. But the direction that the teaching is pointing is always deeper, to the more fundamental, to the essential. What is, yes, you have experiences, you have emotions, you have thoughts, but what's propelling that? See, so we're pointing deeper, underneath the sense of inside and outside. What you have is the sense. That's where we take it. There is the sense there. Now, what is that connected to? What does it spring from? Not in an abstract sense, but in an immediate sense. The sense is there. So you take what is there, and then, if you can, you go deeper.
it's like something that exists and something like a background that is not perceivable, but it's kind of emptiness on the other side, like the emptiness and the senses, that everything that happens, it happens in that emptiness, and there's nothing more in that.
Well, that's the concept, yes. In this teaching, we point to the fact that everything is connected, that there's this incredible web of connections between things that we don't see, that we're not aware of most of the time. And that's kind of abstract. I had an experience yesterday that kind of illustrated this a bit. I have in my Airbnb profile a photo of myself with my little granddaughter, who was at the time just a few months old, I guess. And just a picture of me and her looking at each other. And so I put that up there 2 years ago, or close to 2 years ago, and long since forgotten about it. So I was making an Airbnb reservation in Europe, and I asked the host a question on Airbnb, and I got a reply from her that she had woken up in some distress at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she was restless and checked her phone or mail or whatever, and saw my request and saw the picture that was attached to it of my profile picture, and that it warmed her heart. At, on the other side of the world at 4 o'clock in the morning, in a difficult emotional moment, I guess, for her, this touched her, and that she wanted to thank me for that. And in that, I just saw, this great illustration of how we're connected in ways we don't imagine, can't even begin to comprehend, how various aspects of ourselves, our activities, what we do, how we present ourselves in the world, how the ripples of that go out in ways that most of the time we're completely unaware. We are connected. We are connected in the most intimate way with everything, not just each other, but with everything.
We're connected by the consciousness.
We can say that. But I like Ramesh's adaptation of a traditional Indian image of Indra's net. And what he said was, the universe is uncaused. Normally we think of one thing causing another thing, but the universe is uncaused. Like a net of jewels, in which each jewel is only the reflection of all the others, in a fantastic interrelated harmony without end. Shall I repeat that? So, the universe is uncaused, like a net of jewels. And at the interstice of each point in this net is this jewel, but it doesn't have any independent existence. All it is, what it is the reflection of all the other jewels. All that anything is a reflection of everything else in a fantastic, interrelated harmony without end. So ultimately, everything causes everything else. Now, our minds are not constructed to function with this. Our minds, that it's just too vast. Our minds are connectors between things, quantifiable things, ideas, objects, which are also ideas, but they connect these ideas. That's what the very structure of our intellects are. And all our knowledge is about how this relates to that. And what is connected, what this is connected to, in a very constrained way. It has to be constrained, because even with with the most powerful computers, you're still within finite limits of the relationship between this and that. But our brains, which are far, far more limited in processing power than the computer in your phone, for example, the chip in your phone, our brains can only function in a very restricted frame. And so, to accommodate this, the way we perceive the world is in very simplistic terms. This causes that. This is linked to that. This is responsible for that. And this is all well and good to function, to walk around and turn on the light switches and things. It's good to know that turning on the switch causes the light to go on. And if you have children, you want to teach them how to turn on a light. And explaining that everything is connected to everything is not really going to be very effective in this. However, that if you flip this switch, the light goes on, usually, is an effective tool to have. But it isn't actually what's happening. Flipping the switch does not cause the light to go on in a singular way. Flipping the switch is simply one aspect of a vast interrelated process. The deeper you go into it, the more you see what it's connected to. So we're not here to denigrate the notion of making simple causal connections, but rather to recognize that they are simply shorthand. They're simply tools. They're not adequate descriptors for what is actually happening. And of course, the limitation becomes quickly obvious when you flip the switch and the light doesn't go on. If all you know is that flipping the switch causes the light to go on, you have no other recourse but to stand there and keep flipping the switch until the light goes on. Because that's what causes it. If you want the light to go on, you have to flip the switch. Period. Now, obviously, with more information, with more understanding, with more of the connections of things, you can begin to recognize that, yes, well, the bulb has to be working. Well, yes, the switch itself has various component parts that need to be functioning. That the whole thing is connected to a power grid. That maybe the power grid isn't working. All of these connections to the light going on then come into play. Then you begin to, if you have this greater insight and understanding of things, then you become more functional. So the ultimate functionality as a human being is to understand your true nature. To understand at the most deep intuitive level who and what you are. What is real? What is functional?
At the end of it, it's the self or the consciousness that's real and everything else is false.
You can say that, but it's not true. It's simply a pointer to a truth far bigger than that concept.
Okay. Somehow intellectually, there's, I don't know, it, it's better to try to think of myself as the screen, you know, the screen on which phenomenality occurs, rather than, you know, a meat stick on a dirt ball whirling in space.
Whatever self-image floats your boat.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. There doesn't seem to be any escape.
Doesn't seem to stop me from trying, though.
Sure. I mean, there's whole industries based on that. The drug and alcohol industries come to mind immediately.
Yeah. And there's social media and
All kinds
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, just the thoughts in the mind, sort of projections into the future and into the past. And yeah, I guess right now I'm sort of seeing that with pretty good regularity, with reliability, that I'm escaping from some negative sensation, emotion, or some in the present state. But generally speaking, it's just a simple anger, fear, loneliness, grief.
Yeah, I'm not really totally comfortable with even the word escape, because as pointed out, there is no escape.
No.
The only possibility of escape is if you can somehow get away from what is. That's the only escape.
Yeah.
What you're really talking about is changing your awareness, not escaping your awareness, changing it, such that you're not feeling lonely, angry, remorseful, tired, whatever. You're feeling content, peaceful, at one with the universe. You're seeking to change your awareness, to change your state. But we use the term escape because often it's a result of feeling trapped, feeling like you can't change it. And so you are caged, you are constrained, and the only way out is to escape that. But change is actually fundamental. Change is part of the system, and change will occur.
So is this teaching pointing to yet another change in a way?
No, it's pointing to the fact that there is change, not any particular change, just to the fact that there is.
I guess I'm also looking for maybe the cause of the change. I mean,
Well, coming back to the net of jewels, I mean, if we say you're looking for a cause, a singular cause, then you're going to have some limited singular cause. Like you want to find out what turns the light switch on. What causes that? And you can begin to explore it. And you start with, the obvious. Is usually a good place to start. So you can certainly begin with the obvious fact that turning the light switch on or turning the switch turns the light on. Now, that's useful, very, very useful, but even more useful is when things break down, when things fail. That's an opportunity to test this. You see?
And so bringing it back to this sort of teaching, I mean, is it a matter of just a simple looking, or does the mind play a role as well?
Well, the mind is part of what is. So your mind will likely engage and do what minds do.
I guess quite. So the mind will engage, and I guess whatever other faculties I might have at my disposal, but I guess I'm asking about the sort of, the one that's ultimately going to understand how the light switch works, right? The source of the question, the source of the...
I mean, how you get there, who knows?
No.
How you get there, who knows? There was a book in the late 60s, early 70s, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah.
And it was basically talking a lot about what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how the repair of the motorcycle was not just taking this part. You know, that there was, how this, taking this part off was connected to the attention to how the screwdriver engaged into each screw that held it on. And because without that, then when you strip the screw, suddenly you're no longer doing this task. You're now tapping out the screw, and and the whole thing is a recognition of how even the simple task of putting the screwdriver into the screw head and turning it is essential to the repair of the motorcycle. As essential as removing the part. All these things are connected. So it was a very mechanical way of showing that connection. But everything is very much connected. And how you see that's the Zen part. That's the, having the focus, having the presence to recognize that what you're doing is, whatever it is you're doing, is what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And is, quote, as important in the overall scheme of things and process as anything else.
So going back to that sort of that change of awareness we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
that's another tool in seeing the connections?
No,
Or,
it's not a tool, the change in awareness, that's a result. The change in awareness is a result. The tools are the things that bring about the changes in the awareness. Okay. There's no if that's
and there's a lot of those.
countless.
Yeah.
And whether they're going to be effective or not, in your case, at this time, who knows?
There's a story where one monk was meditating on the image that he's a deer, and then he couldn't go out from his cave because he thought he has this English
Antlers.
antlers, yeah. So that kind of thing happened to me when initially I thought that I'm working to be successful in society, like I'm like a businessman or I'm like have a successful family, and then when all of that failed, that became a part of the story that I'm kind of spiritual person, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to be enlightened in there. And then this thing also failed, and then there was a moment of realization that those two things are equal in terms of both are deers of that monk. And at that point there was a total confusion of the mind that he doesn't actually know what's I don't understand. And so that was happening on maybe half an hour, the whole day was super quiet, my mind was super quiet, and then that story became a part of a new story of the mind. So those two things got included, and there's a new story, and I'm not aware about what am I and the question is that teaching that in the state you're pointing to, or that initial energy, is it makes you free from that?
No,
or
the initial energy is that. If that is what is happening, it must be the product of something. What is it the product of? Even the illusion, even the grandiosity, even the arrogance, even the claim of success or failure. All of that, what is it rooted in? That's what we're concerned with.
But is there a way to go through that? Because looks like this is a limiting thing that mind.
Well, you already went through.
But there was a glimpse or something, right? So it's not something that's that.
Is it possible for that to become permanent?
Yeah.
Not the glimpse, no. The glimpse is dependent upon the possibility of its opposite. What is possible is that the whole mess is transcended. That both the constriction and the liberation that comes from the removal of the restriction, when that paradigm is no longer in place, then we are left with what is.
It's when mind stops imagining your yourself, myself, someone or something. Or is that?
That's not the image that the tool that I use. I mean, the one I used was the one I just used.
I guess there's still this kind of nagging feeling of, because with this teaching, you're giving an awful lot of freedom. You know, you're just whatever happens, and
I'm not giving it, it's here.
or you're pointing, sorry, pointing to a lot of freedom is what I meant to say. But yeah, I don't know. There's still this sort of need to do it right.
Yes.
Am I on the right path? That kind of thing.
Sure. And the teaching gives you the freedom to be that, to be as you are in this moment. To recognize that, yes, those are qualities and characteristics that you have at the moment. They're a product of, your upbringing and your nature and your personality. All of that is what is playing out right now. And you have total freedom to be as you are. That's where the real freedom is. With the acknowledgement, the recognition that to be as you are does not in any way suggest that you will be this way tomorrow. In fact, almost assuredly, no, not almost assuredly, assuredly, you will be different tomorrow than you are today.
Robert Adams talks about that too, what you're talking about. And he said when he wakes up in the morning, there's 3 things he does it as soon as his eyes wake up, or did when he was
Did.
alive.
Yeah.
The first thing was to surrender and say, "Thy will be done" for the day. Secondly was to be the witness, the watcher during the day without attachment. And thirdly was asking, "Who am I?" It just seemed almost too simple, but when I do it in the morning, it really helps. But I notice every day is, like you're saying, every single day is different from the day before. So.
Not only is every day different, but you are different every day. What your hormone levels are, what your blood sugar levels are, how much sleep you've had, how the experiences of the day before have changed you, how what you've read have changed you, how what you have heard on the news has changed you, what you've read in social media has changed you. All of these things are now part of your current awareness that were not part of your current awareness yesterday. And what the impact that will be on your behavior, on your mood, on your, the way you view yourself and others, all of that is unpredictable, of course. But you are changed every moment.
Could you say we are changed?
Good. To the extent that when there's no change, we aren't. We cease to be. Death is the absence of change. We are no longer, and thus we are no longer changing.
I just think next is not having preferences. It's a good way not to suffer.
It's a good way not to have any life, not to have any preferences.
Oh. But preferences is a sort of clinging, isn't it?
I don't have it here, but there's there is a beautiful little booklet. I don't know if it's on the table there behind you. Little
Reflections.
one, Sin Ming. There, yeah. So this is a really interesting example of this. So this guy Richard Clark learned Chinese and translated this text, which is the verses on the faith mind by the third Chinese Zen patriarch. And so he was interested in this text. It's a famous one. And he learned Chinese and he translated it in 1972. And in 1972, he put out this booklet in a bigger form, slightly bigger form, buff colored. And at that time, the first two lines of his translation were, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." Exactly what you say. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. The suggestion is that you don't suffer, which is the difficulty. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And what I would challenge you to do, because I actually tried this, not to have any preferences, because I read that, and Osho did a pitch, a shtick, a thing on that, and they, made it in all of his utterances into books, and one of them was about this. And so it was, and I thought, okay, not having preferences, this makes sense. I know that when I prefer one thing over another, there's pain associated with that. So I assumed that pain and suffering were the same thing at that time. So I thought, aha, if I want to not suffer anymore, I get rid of the underlying pain, and the way to do that is not to have any preferences. I tried, really tried all kinds of things, and I turned off rock and roll music in my car, and I put on Kenny G, and nobody ever got their passion stirred up by Kenny G, and I recognized that all of these things were associated with preferences, with having passions about things. So I stopped eating meat, and because the passion, the energy of the dying animal was got into you, and so all of that. What finally did me in was sex. I could not have sex. It was at the end of a bad marriage. It was easy. But I couldn't stop thinking about sex. And what I finally came to was, okay, I'm sitting here, I've got a beautiful woman here who wants to have sex with me. Over here, I have a big, ugly man who wants to beat the shit out of me. And I have no preference. And I thought, I am never going to get there. Never in a million years am I possibly going to get there, and I don't want to get there. Where it makes no difference to me whether I'm having the shit beat out of me or I'm having a beautiful sexual experience. It is all the same. No. Richard Clark lived in the Buddhist community in Massachusetts for 30 more years. Retranslated the same text 30 years later, in 2001, 29 years later. This is what the first two lines were. The great way is not difficult for those not attached to preferences. Having the preference is part of being alive. We are organisms with preferences. They're built in. Our desires, our preferences, are a function of our being as humans. what creates the suffering is the attachment. I call the secondary involvement, or the involvement by the false sense of authorship. This is where the suffering lies. Yes, pain and pleasure come from preferences. When you get what you prefer, there's pleasure. When you don't get what you prefer, there's pain. But pain and pleasure are the salt and pepper of life. I mean, this is what gives life its spice, its qualities, its energy. Its vivacity is this. Otherwise, you've got tofu. Just plain, bland, colorless, tofu life. So, getting rid of the pain and the pleasure is not the objective here. It is to recognize that something comes in and hijacks the pain and converts it into suffering. And this is what he's saying. It is the attachment to the preference. The sense that if I get this, I am going to be at peace, that it is going to fulfill me, that it is going to bring me something other than the fulfillment of my desire. That's the attachment. And that's where the suffering lies.